how does habitus maybe artificially limit your sense of what is possible? And how does goal diffusion sometimes put things in front of you that probably are really unlikely to happen? Or alternatively, how can you use goal diffusion to find a group of people to be around so that you'll start wanting what they want more, which will give you more motivation and persistence to pursue something, especially if that something is hard. I want to introduce you to a couple of sociological terms that can help answer the question, why do you want what you want? So I know that probably the question most people ask themselves is, what do I want? And maybe you need some clarity there. And I have an online course called Career Clarity just to help people answer that question. But I want to get a little theoretical, and I think this can be personally insightful as well. In a way, we're taking a meta step. We're not just asking, what do you want? We're asking, why do you want what you want? So once you've decided that there are certain pathways for you, what led you to make that decision? I mean, there's thousands of job titles out there. The US government tracks types of jobs, and currently their list in ONET, that's the database they keep it in, has over 3,000 titles in the United States. And different companies might have different names for the same kind of title in ONET, but over 3,000 jobs. Odds are you've only considered pursuing a small range of those, maybe a dozen different titles that you think would be a good fit for who you are. So there's been a lot of selection and narrowing that's already happened before you've made your choice. And then out of that 20 or 10 that you were choosing between, you finally make a decision. And so I want to ask, why did you pick that? Now you may know between the handful of final options why you picked something. Maybe they were the place that actually hired you. Or maybe it was something to do with features of the job, the flexible work environment, or the stable salary and pay and benefits, or something like that. Or maybe it was something, you majored in it and, you were a nursing major and you wanted to be a nurse and it was a logical connection. So be it. But what made you decide not to pursue the thousands of other options? And most of that choosing was subconscious. Like you didn't actually choose not to pursue it. You probably, in many cases, just didn't know about it. So, there's a kind of truism in career counseling that, people can only pursue jobs that they, A, know exist, and B, think are the kinds of jobs people like them do. And so those are two important things. Why is it that you don't know about most professions? So people end up in them, but most people don't know about most professions. So, if we come from different walks of life, we're probably completely unaware of whole possible professional swaths or of opportunity out there. And then the second part of what I said, you'll end up in a job that you know exists and you think is good for a person like you. There's a part of it that's linked to identity or socialization. So here's where these two sociological ideas come in that can be helpful. One is called goal diffusion, and one is our habitus. And they do similar but sort of opposite things in our selection process. So first, let's talk about habitus. French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu is the originator of this idea, and largely it has to do with the class conditioning we have when we're growing up, how we're socialized, to start to think that certain things are for people like us and certain things aren't. And a lot of his work goes into things like the kinds of foods we decide we like, or the kinds of art or entertainment that we would consume or not consume. And a lot of it is class conditioned, right? As you can, probably even stereotypically think, how do rich people, what kind of entertainment and food and cars and vacations would they take versus, middle class or working class or the poor. And so is some of it that is class. There could be other components. Maybe some of it has to do with race or religion or nationality, things like that. But a lot of it, to Bourdieu, is linked to a subconscious set of calculations or probabilities. What are the odds that someone like me will be successful if I pursue a path like that? And if we don't perceive our odds as very good, we often decide we don't like it, or that we don't want it, or that it's distasteful to us. And according to Bourdieu, the habitus becomes very embodied in us. It literally is our tastes, our dispositions, and our preferences. And so when we see things that we don't think people like us usually do well in, rather than simply saying, I don't think I do well, we end up saying, ugh, I would hate that. Ugh, I don't want to do that. And so this is something worth noting, that there is a kind of subconscious calculation going on with a lot of career possibilities that cause us to just think it's not for us, but we might not really know. And so, if you grow up in an environment where nobody is a doctor or a lawyer, right? But they are nurses and teachers and firefighters, then when it comes time to looking at the options, and maybe you are interested in the medical fields, and you could decide whether to go to a nursing program or an MD program, try to become a doctor, you might look at the requirements and go, oh, ugh, the MD program does not look fun. I don't think I'd enjoy that. And then you'd pick nursing. And when you can think of your aunt or your best friend's mom who was a nurse and they were great, and you kind of maybe you shadowed them at work one time, and you have a sense of what the work is like, and it seems appealing to you. But also there's a kind of probability calculus you did, even if it was subconscious. Oh, people like me do jobs like that, but nobody I know has done a job like that. And so you want to really step back, and before you write off certain things, especially because they might be harder, is it really because you don't think it's a good match for who you are, or that you couldn't accomplish it? Or is it the habitus just causing you to say, oh, I don't think I'd like that, but you really haven't explored the possibility? So habitus is helpful in that we don't beat ourselves up a ton for not achieving things that we probably didn't have great odds at getting in the first place. But it can be sort of like sour grapes, right? The Aesop's fable of the fox who couldn't reach the grapes and then goes, ugh, they're probably sour anyway. I don't even want them. Most of us, we don't beat ourselves up that we're not a senator or we're not going to be president of the United States or an astronaut, because we kind of know those are really hard to attain and maybe it's not worth the effort to pursue. But there are things that maybe we could have pursued that aren't actually that much more work when you consider, to the example I said of nursing versus being a doctor. And nothing against nursing, it's a wonderful profession, and it's certainly not easy, but that's my point. It's not an easy job. The nursing programs are still rigorous, and even though you're out of it sooner than out of a doctoral program or a medical school program, you're going to work in a challenging field. So you're still going to be spending time working hard, it's just after the degree. So what's the difference between working hard for an extra year or two for the degree? If maybe you would find more satisfaction in this path, should you consider really giving it a try? Maybe you will fail, and that's okay. If you don't make it in an MD program, you could still try a nursing program, or you could try something altogether different. But be careful not to write yourself off of bigger opportunities simply because they might be a little harder or more challenging. And rather than really taking a minute to say, I bet I can go for this, instead you just go, ugh, that's not for someone like me. Okay, what's the second sociological idea I want to talk about? That is goal diffusion. So habitus constricts the kinds of things you think someone like you could do based on what you've seen growing up and what your class condition is and what you think your probability is. It constricts you to a smaller set of options that your preferences will then make you want to go for. Goal diffusion does a little bit of the opposite. It's where you learn to want things because it's what people around you want. And so you might see people desiring something you've never even thought of. But if you like those people, they seem cool to you or they're close to you, you might start wanting what they want. It's interesting to note that, humans, even though it might seem like a lot of us want the same things in life, we all want love and we all want to be, wealthy or famous or whatever, we still have to learn to want from other people. It's still learned attributes. It's still socialized into us. You're not born with everyone wanting the same things, right? Some basic needs of, food and shelter and safety, sure. But a house in the suburbs, leisurely retirement with a good 401k? What are your ultimate desires? To win a certain industry award, or to, the things you want, you have to learn from somewhere. Okay, so very few of us want things that are so unique to us that we made them up ourselves. Instead, we looked at different referent groups, and because we prefer certain referent groups over others, we look at those people and they're pursuing certain things, and then we just start to want the same things they want. Now, what does this mean when it comes to choosing careers? It means that if there are certain professions put before you as highly desirable, it's not going to be surprising if you then start to see those as highly desirable, even for yourself. Now, think of things like, there's a recent study in the UK where they asked kids what they wanted to be when they grow up, and 1 out of 5 said they wanted to be an influencer or like a YouTuber or something like that. Far more than said they wanted to be a doctor. Right? Now, I don't know how many, per capita of 100,000 citizens we need, how many of them to be influencers, but probably not 1 out of 5, which is what the students wanted. In my own research, I've asked students, when you're a kid and people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I look at the list of responses, there's a lot of, reasonable ones: teacher, firefighter, some kind of wild ones, president of the United States, superhero, but super common are sports stars and celebrities on TV, or rock stars. And so when we look at these kinds of things, right, like, why do a lot of people want to be an influencer or a sports star? If habitus was true, if we don't think the odds of us getting it are very high, so we would just go, ugh, I don't like that. Well, it's because of goal diffusion, because those people's stories get promoted to us. Now, we may not see what advanced accounting professionals' lives look like in our multimedia or in the people around us. So we may not think we want something like that. But even though we might grow up, say, working class, and we know what construction jobs are like, or certain service, work jobs are like, we still end up knowing what NBA players' jobs are like, and what rock stars are like, and what influencers are like, because we still have those stories put before us in our media. So there gets to be some interesting variations here in what people want, where on one hand, they only want things they know and think are good for people like them, habitus. But then there will be these occasional exceptions of sometimes things that are astronomically unlikely to happen, like being a rock star or an influencer, because goal diffusion has put a few of these exceptions in front of us. So what's the point of all this? If you're aware of it, you can use it to your advantage. You can, one, look at goal diffusion and say, why do I want what I want? And you can say, okay, some of these things I want probably just because it's the media I consume. But maybe there's something you think you'd like to pursue, but you haven't had anyone around you pursuing that. And you can start to engineer your own goal diffusion by finding a group of people pursuing something you think you'd like to pursue and connecting with them. Maybe it's just online, or maybe you can work it out somewhere in real life. But if you're with a group of people all pursuing a similar goal, you'll find yourself starting to desire that goal more. And then with habitus, if you find yourself distasting and not wanting certain things, it could be helpful to step back and go, is this just some of my class conditioning making me think that, I'm not capable or not worthy of certain kinds of professions or programs? Because maybe once you're aware of it, you can step out of that a little more boldly, a little more confidently. And if you make it, there are plenty of people who make it into these programs they never thought they could get into. And sometimes then they have a little bit of imposter syndrome when they first get in. But if you fake it till you can make it, you get some mentors and you get some support and you're diligent, many people overcome that. And they realize, I was totally capable of this. I don't know why I questioned my abilities to start. Human capacity and intelligence doesn't have that wide of a range. Yes, there are people with some cognitive disabilities, and maybe, I guess, there could be some geniuses out there. But the vast majority of us are not that far apart from each other in intelligence. It's often just the opportunities our society structures for us, and the support we have to have the persistence to chip away at these things. And there's a lot of other stuff I could talk about, cultural capital and social networks and things like that. But I simply want to leave you with those two ideas. How does habitus maybe artificially limit your sense of what is possible? And how does goal diffusion sometimes put things in front of you that probably are really unlikely to happen? Or alternatively, how can you use goal diffusion to find a group of people to be around so that you'll start wanting what they want more, which will give you more motivation and persistence to pursue something, especially if that something is hard. Good luck.